The perplexed level worker soon leaves the guild, and Telar puts away her notes to give to Tal once he's done with his short sabbatical. Her doors open again, and she's surprised to see a certain gnome walk in, though his orc companion is much less of a surprise. "Head Priest Torlon and Freddy, to what do I owe the pleasure?" she asks, before remembering. "Ah, right. The consecration. How did it go?" The gnome and orc exchange a look before the head priest speaks. "Well, it's consecrated, but I worry we may have insulted the dungeon." Telar looks confused at that. "Insulted? How?" She sighs and digs out a scroll. This sounds like it's going to be complicated. Torlon turns to Freddy. "You were there, son. Go ahead." "We went to go do the consecration, and the acolyte in charge tried to consecrate it in the name of the Crystal Shield, and it didn't work. Then he tried to force it, and that didn't work either. Then one of the ratkin that lives there tried, and it worked. And the acolyte started making a scene because of it. Grim, the skeleton scion, came up and shushed him, and the acolyte attacked, but it had no effect. Then we left," he explains, giving a quick summary of what happened. Torlon speaks up next. "The former head acolyte has been punished, and is no longer afforded even the small portion of power he had. He's a good lad, but headstrong, not thinking things through. I told him to do a general consecration, but I fear his zeal may have made things difficult for us all. Is there any way to make amends with the dungeon?" Telar tries not to groan at the potential mess they put on her desk. "Well, you're correct to demote the one who tried that. Consecrating an area in a dungeon in the name of any deity forms a pact, which could have been even more of a potential mess if the dungeon had accepted. And then trying to force the matter. I personally would suggest against him going back into that dungeon for a long time, possibly ever again." She sighs. "And as for making amends, that's complicated. If it was a toy box, a simple gift and apology would usually be enough. If it was belligerent or murderous, there'd be no real point in trying to apologize. But the Four Dock dungeon is cooperative. That doesn't mean it's a pushover. That means it's willing to cooperate if it can get something." She takes a few moments to gather her thoughts, glad she's been reading up on cooperative dungeons, and letting the two fidget in discomfort. She turns her eyes on Freddy. "You said you left? Not that you were chased out?" He nods. "Yeah, after Grim shushed him, the skeleton simply turned and left." "And the ratkin wasn't hostile either?" The young orc shakes his head, and Telar relaxes at least a little. "Well, I don't think it directly took insult, but a proper apology of some kind would be a good idea. Most cooperative dungeons respond well to an expenditure of effort and will." Freddy gives her a confused look. What now?" She chuckles and continues. "Effort and will. Dungeons allow delvers to fight and loot because they expend effort and will, which vitalizes the dungeon. The precise mechanics are still unknown, but in short, go delve. Maybe offer it a gift of some important or powerful item too." This time it's the priest's turn to look confused. "That's it? Just go and be a delver?" Telar considers for a moment before speaking again. "Well, follow the implied rules of the dungeon. If you just go in there and start wreaking havoc, I doubt it'll be pleased. But if you wander around, maybe accept and do a quest or two for it, fight some, gather some, just show it that you are not there to try and to tame it. And do so in your full capacity as a priest of the Crystal Shield. It needs to understand that the church as a whole doesn't want to rule it." Torlon looks a bit confused. On the one hand, that would be no problem for him to do. He actually would very much enjoy at least a small chance to stretch his adventuring muscles again. But then again, that's the problem. One usually doesn't get to enjoy apologizing. "You're certain that would work?" Telar laughs. "With Four Dock, I'm not certain of anything, but I do think that's your best bet if you want to try to smooth things over." The priest can't help but chuckle at that. "I'll see what I can do then. A gift and do some delving." The dungeon. Rocky's training is going. I don't know if it's going well, but he's doing a little better. All I've been able to have him do is shadowbox and get him to practice punches. I think I understand the difference between a hook and a cross. Maybe. A jab and uppercut are simple enough, at least in theory. I just have documentaries and movies to remember the theory, and it's up to Rocky to put it to practice. At least he seems to like it. I'm just glad his form looks closer to what I'd imagine a beginner human would be, rather than the flailing of a rotting corpse. So I guess there really is progress being made after all. I'm also drawing up designs for various equipment and even a boxing ring for him. A heavy bag will probably be the simplest thing to actually make. I don't know where I actually got the leather from, but I'm happy to have it. Maybe a mix of sand and web would give it the right feel. The gates opening at the cemetery side draw my attention away, and I see a new delver. And Freddy. From the look, this is Freddy's boss. Looks like the two are having a bit of disagreement about something. Are you sure? It seems kinda important to just give away, says the young orc, and the gnome decked out in chainmail, a scepter and crystal shield nods. And that's why I'm giving it away, Freddy. I'll miss it, of course, but it doesn't do much just hanging on the wall over my desk. Now, you said the skeleton sign is around here somewhere? Freddy still looks uncertain, but nods. Yeah, every time I've seen him, he's over here somewhere, doing groundskeeping, or grounds reaping things, I guess. Huh. Hey, Grim, you've got company. Go see what they want. I'm pretty sure they're not here to start trouble, at least. The skeleton stands from the small flower patch where daffodils have been growing, and makes his way towards the pair. Freddy and the priest head for the centre of the graveyard, and the priest looks around approvingly. It is sanctified, as you said, and seems to be well cared for, too. It broke my heart how Neverest treated this place. I'm glad it's in better hands. The two mostly wander for a few minutes while Grim makes his way over, the living quietly appreciating the work and the rest of the dead. The priest notices Grim first, which isn't surprising. I'd wager this guy is even stronger than Elf Guy. Ah, the skeleton scion. You said his name is Grim, Freddy. He does cut an imposing figure, doesn't he? Said imposing figure stops before the two and waits. It takes almost a minute for the two to realize Grim can't speak, so it's on them to start any conversation, one-sided as it may be. The priest clears his throat and takes a step forward. Greetings, Grim, and greetings, Dungeon, as well. Grim gives a nod, and the gnome continues. I'd like to apologize on behalf of the Church of the Crystal Shield for the behavior of one of our acolytes. He was asked to do a general consecration, not one in the name of the shield, and he certainly was not asked to attack your scion, he said, raising his voice like I can't hear him. That's fair, though. He probably hasn't talked to a lot of dungeons. So, I've come to make amends, if amends can be made. I offer you my shield as part of the apology, he says, and holds the shield towards Grim, who tilts his head in question. Yes, I mean it. It is yours to do with as you will. It protected me from my days as an adventurer, and is important to me, just as a peaceful relationship between you and the church is important to me too. Well, I'm glad he's taken it seriously. I probably would have just let him be, but he seemed to generally want to try to make it up to me. It's a little awkward to take his shield from him, but I'm not getting any notices or packs or whatever, so I tell Grim to go ahead and accept it. The gnome smiles in relief once he does. Thank you, Dungeon. I've also been told a good way to try to make up for the mistake is to do some delving. Would you be amenable to that? Heck yeah, I would be. I even know what I want him to do. Or at least, try to do. Grim nods and points past the gates, where the belfry of the house can just be seen over the various rooftops of the town, and Freddy speaks up. Over there is where most of the fun stuff is, sir. This side is still a bit of a mess from what I could tell with Mr. Tal. The gnome smiles and gives Grim a small bow. Thank you, Grim. I'll go delve where it's appropriate to do so, then. The two turn to leave, and once they're out of sight, I tell Grim to take a shortcut. I know exactly where I want that shield. By the time the two enter the typical Delver gates, I have things prepared. Freddy is looking excited and directs his boss to the porch to see what information there is to see, and stops and stares at the little wooden sign dangling from the rafters. The priest, though, simply smiles at the design. That's it? That doesn't seem like too difficult a task, he says, peering at the sign. They're much more legible already, thanks to Honey's help. Loot Tiny's chest.